Welcome to the Connected Mom podcast, friends. I'm excited to be here with you today. I am Becky Harling, your host, and we like to have conversations on the Connected Mom that are particularly real and raw. And we don't do guilt, just so you know. So if you're afraid that we're going to make you feel guilty today, we pinky swear there is no guilt here. Our goal is to help you connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. And I don't know about you, but I found myself at times yelling up the stairs. I had 4 kids, right? And I knew my kids weren't hard of hearing, except like when I was calling them to do something they didn't want to do, right? And I'm guessing that at different points of your motherhood journey, you've yelled up the stairs, or maybe you've completely lost it with one of your kids. And then you've laid in bed that night just thinking, oh, I'm such an awful mom. I've blown it. Well, I have good news for you today, because today's guest is Janel Breitenstein, and she has written a book all about yelling up the stairs, and she's going to give you hope today. So don't go anywhere. Lean in and listen, and maybe even take a couple of notes. Welcome, Janel. It's delightful to have you here.
I'm so jazzed to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Becky.
Yeah, and you've done quite a bit of writing for Focus on the Family, Family Life Today, and then what number book is this for you?
This one's 3, and then I got another one issuing in October as well. So,
okay, you're hardcore there, girl. And how many kids do you have?
I have 4 too, but it feels like 6. So I feel like I should get the credit.
Yeah, maybe you should. Maybe it's, yeah. Anyway, one of my kids said to me, Mom, my kids are so loud. And I'm like, baby, they come by it naturally. It was in our DNA. So there's that, right? So how old are your kids?
My oldest is 21 and he's in the Marines, and my youngest is 16. So if you're doing the math there, there were no twins in that. At one point I had 4 and under. But a couple of them felt like twins. So
yeah, I get that. So you have raised these kiddos, and the title of your book is Stop Yelling Up the Stairs, which I love, or How to Stop Yelling Up the Stairs. I think that is a fantastic title. So first of all, congratulations. So tell us, what made you write the book?
I wish I could say that none of this was from my personal experience and it was only from my conversations with other moms.
That would be great.
Wouldn't it? But, I found that when I was speaking to moms on mom anger, it was funny because even the meekest mothers would start leaning in with these "you too" looks on their faces. It felt like we were joining a secret club, kind of the fight club. Anyway, we'll call it the Christian Moms Fight Club. But it was so amazing to find out that really every mom I talked to had her own kind of anger DNA, her own journey with anger. And everyone was kind of surprised because we don't end up talking about it. Mostly, as you implied at the beginning, we're all so ashamed at the fact that we're yelling at a 2-year-old or at an 8-year-old, but it also feels extremely legitimate in the moment. And so it was something that I realized not only was it something we could all identify with, but it was also a place where I really intimately ended up encountering God. So I'll tell you more about that.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought God into the picture, because I think a lot of us were raised in a culture of Christianity that made you feel like you could never get angry, And I remember being a young mom and having all these unwritten rules for myself, right? Never get angry, never raise your voice, never, lose it with your kids. And that put a lot of pressure on me because nobody's a perfect mom and everybody gets angry. But I think the church as a whole has made us feel somewhat guilty about getting angry. So then it's easier to deny your anger. And then you're like, I'm not angry, And it's like, well, clearly you are.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because that's really been my experience that actually some of the stigmas that we put around anger, in sometimes poor theology of what it means to be a Christian woman, actually ends up making at least for me, my anger journey was worse because of that, because I would deny and deny and deny until at one point I was shotgunning that at my kids. I would not acknowledge the ways I needed help. So many different, misunderstandings actually made me a worse parent and actually an angrier mom. And there's some really kind of scary statistics about women who don't acknowledge that they get angry, that it can actually lead to some extreme cardiovascular issues and things like that. But when we look at God, I'm intrigued because I see God getting angry in the
Yeah, I
Bible.
do too. And I wasn't taught that, were you? I mean, the God that I was taught about it was like he didn't have any emotions, and it's like, okay, clearly that's not true. I mean, he opened the earth and swallowed the sons of Korah when they weren't doing right. I mean, he got angry at the Israelites. Jesus himself flipped the tables. So I don't know why we thought anger was sin per se. I think it's what we do with our anger, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and you're nearly quoting there Ephesians 4:26 that says, "Be angry and do not sin." Right. And we read later that the anger of man does not bring about the righteousness of God. So then we have to we start getting to the point where we actually start dissecting our anger. If anger itself is not the problem, we need to start asking questions like, whose kingdom is my anger about? Actually, is this my anger? Is this truly anger about God and his kingdom? Or is this actually anger about my own kingdom? And that's where it gets tricky because as Counselor Brad Hambrick has said, when we're angry, we all think we're Jesus flipping over tables in the temple, right?
Right. Right. And I think sometimes our anger just comes because we're being inconvenienced or whatever. But let me ask you this, Janelle. Okay, sometimes as Christian parents who are godly, we're going to get frustrated with our kids. And do we say that's a sin?
I mean, that therein lies the question, right? Like what is good anger? What is godly anger? And what is actually sinful anger? And usually I find, that the line between good and evil lies right down the middle of my heart. And so it's kind of, I'll use the example from one of my cars. There was a day when, I was going to, my husband was like, we really need to take the car into the mechanic because the check engine light is on. And, at one point, I was on my way to the dentist, to do all the things I love at once, taking the car to the mechanic and going to the dentist. And the lights, yes, and the light starts flashing. And I think it's surely not because, wow, you're such a great driver, and, so at my house, because I'm not particularly mechanical, we're going to take the car to the local shop and they're going to plug in one of those computers that spits out a code. Now, what I could have done is, slap a bluey sticker over the check engine light and we're just going to pretend it's not there. Or we can start decoding some of the codes that our heart is throwing, so in that kid, when you're, let's say you're going out the door for Bible study, this is an example from my life. I realized that I would tend to get angry with my kids, when I was going out the door for Bible study of all the things. And it turned out,
that's awesome.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yes.
And I think it was because I'm kind of an achiever and I also was so overwhelmed with all the things that moms have to do. And so I would allow myself no margin. And I would think something like, when I get home from Bible study, I need to put the kids down for a nap. So it would be great if I had the dishwasher run by the time that they're eating lunch before naps. So I could and then I was thinking, oh, I need to go around the house and I need to collect the sippy cups and, all the things that moms think. And by the time that I'm ready to go out the door, someone has messed in the pull-up I just put on them to go to Bible study. And the other person has lost a 3-inch long shoe. And I am just, about to to lose it. And it would have been really wise if what could I have done? Let me put it this way. What version of Jesus would my kids have seen if I just created 10 more minutes of margin before we're headed out the door? Because our kids are seeing how God deals with them in their conflict, in our conflict with him, and how he deals with them in how we deal with them in conflict. We're reflecting something. We're making disciples of our kids in how we're angry. So what kind of Jesus are they seeing? Simply because I'm not being thoughtful even about my triggers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our triggers are a big thing. And I think, I think it can be normal to get, frustrated maybe with the child who consistently forgets their homework or whatever. But even there, if you pause and you dig underneath and you ask a few good questions, what do they need to help them remember? What do you need so that it doesn't bother you as much, and just, I think as parents, it would be great to grow in self-awareness. What's behind this emotion I'm feeling right now towards my child? Am I embarrassed of their behavior? Is that why I'm upset? Am I being inconvenienced? Like I'm on the way out the door to Bible study, for goodness sakes. I'm doing God's will and you're holding me up.
How could you lose your shoe? Yes.
And I have to say, for me, this was an aha moment, I remember reading through the Gospels thinking Jesus never turned to the disciples and said, will you guys hurry up and get your sandals on? We're running late. I mean, right? And it was life-changing for me because I realized part of my angst was that I was always hurrying them out the door to the next thing. And to your point, if we put 10 more or 15 more minutes in there, maybe we wouldn't have to rush them. And maybe then instead of losing it over the lost shoe, we could actually go help them find the shoe. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I've realized that anger is this jetpack emotion that God has given us, ideally in his image. Clearly, it's something that sin has infected, just like every other part of us. But when we go back to what is God's anger about, it's an activating emotion. Unlike sadness, which I don't know about you, but sadness is exhausting to me. When I'm grieving, it puts me in slow-mo. But anger, it activates us to do something, because anger is ideally about creating justice in the world. Something precious to me has been trampled on. I think you accented that beautifully when you're like, okay, is this maybe my embarrassment, my pride, is that being stepped on, my convenience? And sometimes, yeah, it's the kid who's not getting their homework in. And there is a sense of, you could be doing more. This is not about your learning disorder or something like that. This is about actual laziness or actual, lack of organization or something like that. And I want more for you, so when we're able to dissect that, then we're able to think, what is this jetpack toward? What is precious that is being trampled on? And then we're able to answer that question of, whose kingdom is this anger really about?
I love that. So in your book, I'm assuming, I have not read it yet. I do want to read it, but what would be some practical tips for the mom who is like, you know what, you're talking to me. I am getting angry at my kids and I'm really frustrated right now. And there's a lot of chaos in our home. What would be some practical steps, like maybe give us 3 that they could do or take right away to help them calm things down?
Sure. I think that's a great question, because sometimes we just need some quick wins, right? And something that if I change my behavior, I know I can start winning this war. I think for one of them, for me, it was very helpful for me to start understanding the human brain when it's in fight, flight, freeze mode. And that means in ourselves and in our child. Now, I don't know about you, Becky, but I have found that fight, flight, freeze, God definitely gave it to me for a reason. He doesn't if my child is running out into the street, I need to activate immediately and stop them from, going to get that soccer ball or whatever. But on the whole, sometimes that fight, flight, freeze, which happens when I'm angry, it's almost like my brain is kind of inflamed. And James Wilder, Dr. James Wilder, he calls this enemy mode, where we're unable to kind of connect with the Holy Spirit. We're unable to connect with other people because of where our brains are at. And that actually lasts 20 to 60 minutes statistically. So I personally have found that is generally not the most holy version of myself.
You think?
And so if that's the case, if I know that that's not going to be the most holy version of myself, and I'm going to think that I'm Jesus flipping over tables, but actually I'm about my own kingdom, then what I've started to say to my kids is sometimes something like, you know what? I'm about to sin against you right now, and I need to step away, and we are going to talk about this in about 25 minutes. And in that case, I tend to make much more measured, proactive rather than reactive decisions toward my kids. And then
like a mommy timeout.
It is. And I don't think that's weak at all. Now, granted, with younger kids, sometimes we need to have very young kids. We're trying to attach that discipline almost to that less developed part of their brain so that they know to obey right away. Absolutely right away. And there are times when we need more immediate discipline. But on the whole, I would say I do my best parenting when I first step away. And I actually think if you look at secular psychologists like Dan Siegel, that also influences when our kids are finding that window to most receive what we're trying to say, because they're not in enemy mode either. They, if they are in that fight, flight, freeze mode, they're ready to fight you, or they're ready to shut you out, or even pretend that what you're saying, they're going to receive it, because maybe that, fawn is another one of those: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They're going to be pleasers. But, I found that the most genuinely soft that my kids will be is usually after that fight, flight, freeze. So I'd say timing is part of how I've learned to actually get the most for my discipline, because their hearts are open and receptive too. So that would be one of my first, maybe that counts as items 1 and 2 on your list. But another one, and this one may make you laugh. I tell you what, you will never find me writing a book on, Becky, and that's potty training.
Don't say that.
You're right. God may have something different, right? But potty training is one of the things I was terrible at, because with these kids all, like, I was kind of running a preschool. I just wanted to have only 2 in diapers and not 3. So I was trying to get some of these kids potty trained before I would have another baby. And
the common struggle.
Yes, it is. And so but one of the things I did learn from potty training that's very basic, and I think most experts would agree, is that there are kind of 3 stages to potty training. Okay. There is, I realize I just went. Okay. Something just happened. Then you kind of start realizing, oh, this is happening right now. And then eventually you learn, oh, this is about to happen. I need to get to a bathroom. And I would actually say that I feel like most moms, we need to kind of potty train our anger. That first we need to, we first need to realize, oh, that's what I don't want to do. What just happened in the kitchen there, that's what I don't want to do. I had a friend who actually decided to catalog this on her calendar. She would put AO on every day she had an angry outburst. And now since you're keeping it real on your podcast, I will say that mine tended to cluster toward 1 week a month. Where those hormones are just really raging, but I think that can actually cause me to have, more generous margins with myself in that week, or not attempt the same kinds of things that I would attempt, because I know that I'm more prone to anger. Same thing. Maybe you start realizing that, oh, wow, the less godly version of myself is also when I haven't been getting a REM cycle because I've been nursing a baby. Okay. I need to act differently, because I know I'm going to be more prone. James Wilder also I think he has a great illustration of the fight, flight, freeze in our brains is almost like a circuit breaker. What happens in my kitchen when I plug in the Instant Pot and the toaster oven, at the same time, it's too much. It floods the circuit and the circuit breaker flips. Well, when our circuits are kind of already dealing with less sleep, or we're hungry, or we had an argument with our husbands early that morning. I'm sure that doesn't happen to any of you. In that case, the circuit breaker is already pretty loaded, and we're going to flip more easily. And so I would say we start to learn that just happened, and we start to identify patterns and triggers. Then we realize, oh no, this is happening. I need to make a strategy right now because I'm about to lose control, and then we learn before or I am losing control. And that's one of those opportunities when we also can set a culture in our homes of, I'm sorry, I forgive you. And we learn to clean up after ourselves, and we learn to show our kids, this is how God acts toward us when we screw up, and because far more than our kids needing perfect moms, our kids need moms who need Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. So we've been talking primarily about anger and maybe little kids, but I think a lot of times some anger can come out during the teen years if there's like a power struggle between teen and mom. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I wish that was not something that was still currently occasionally an issue in my home, because I have three really boys, and I have a strong-willed girl as well. And again, my oldest is in the Marines. My second oldest was a linebacker. I've got big boys and I've got strong boys, and some of them just went through a lot of angry years. And thankfully, I feel like by God's kindness, and I'm not going to say this happens across the board, but especially with my older two who've left the home, God restored a lot of what the locusts have eaten, so to speak. I have great relationships with my adult boys now. We talk a couple of hours a week, not in a hover mom sense, but we really enjoy each other's friendship.
I get it. Yeah.
And I did deal with a lot of anger. I think a lot of, they'll tell you that anger, you can see this on the internet, but the anger is a secondary emotion that usually beneath it. Yeah, you probably heard that. Beneath it, you've got things
expand.
like, yeah. With teenagers, that might look like disappointment, and what you thought, or maybe you're afraid because, wow, this kid is graduating in a year and I can't believe how he treats women, or how little of a work ethic this child has, or all the things that fear is a big, jet engine, I feel like, behind a lot of mom anger. I think,
I do too. Yeah.
Even Peter says, you're Sarah's daughters if you don't give way to fear. He knew that women would struggle with the powerlessness we often feel. So I guess I'll just say I have, part of what was helpful for me was to identify what was underneath that. Sometimes it's sadness. I'm really sad about the ways that my kids are not walking with God. That I've had kids who've really asked, that they've deconstructed while they were under my roof, which I'm thankful it was under my roof. I'm thankful that they asked questions, but it was scary and it was sad. And those emotions were really real. Thankfully, as they were maturing, God was also growing me up. And I felt like usually that didn't leak, as much as it used to when I was a kid, but that was still really, really tangible. And the funny thing is that I think, just like David in the Bible, those were opportunities for me to just throw myself at God's feet, to throw those anxieties, really throw those on him, and for him to meet me there, which I couldn't have experienced if I was denying the fact that I felt anger at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about just kind of bringing our anger before the Lord authentically, because I think there's a whole realm of emotions in the mothering journey. And I think fear is a big factor in all this, like you said. But if you can learn to take everything to Jesus, the good, the bad, the ugly, when you blow it, take it to Jesus. when, you're scared to death, when your kid's going AWOL, whatever. If you can learn to bring that to Jesus, that's the best thing you can do for your kids anyway, and just learning how to manage that. We are just about out of time, unfortunately. But what would you say to the mom who's listening to this, who is like, oh, dang, I am really blowing it. And now I feel guilty because I realize I have a lot of anger. What would you tell her tonight?
What a great question. Honestly, I wish that I could go to coffee with that mom and just sit across from her and just look her in the eyes, because I think what I'd want to express to her is something that I hope she can hear. Um, I hope that you can speak God's unconditional love over yourself, because I think sometimes in our desire to give ourselves adequate guilt so that we'll really change, that's not actually, I feel like, how God draws us to repentance. It says in Romans that it's his kindness, that leads us to repentance. And I think sometimes in the way we speak to ourselves after angry outbursts really does not speak the gospel over our own souls. It doesn't speak God's forgiveness and his life-giving hope over us, which is what we want to speak to our own kids after disciplining them. This is not who you will be, because God has declared victory over sin. And there's so many promises in Revelation to those who overcome. So I guess I would just let her know, man, is God just nuts about you right now, despite the fact that you're sinning. When you look at how your kids messed up and how you actually hopefully want to lean toward them in that sin, God is leaning toward you, and he can't wait to write a different future for your family.
I love that. I love that. That's such a great place to end. Moms, I would just say to you, God is for you. He's not against you. In fact, scripture tells us that Jesus is praying for you, and he understands how hard it is to parent a child. I mean, his own kids messed up in the Garden of Eden. So, he gets it. And you can depend on him. And like Janelle said earlier, when you do blow it, it becomes a magnificent and beautiful opportunity to go to your kids and say, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And they will, because you are modeling for them what you're hoping they're going to do as adults. So Janelle, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can our moms get Stop Yelling Up the Stairs?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. I would love it if you check it out on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, or any of the major booksellers. And certainly support small businesses as well. I am cheering you on, moms.
Yeah. And we will have the book in the show notes so that you can go ahead and click on that and order it, and I really want to encourage you moms to get this one, because I've talked with hundreds of moms who feel guilty when they blow it and get angry with their kids, but there's hope. So don't forget that. Thanks for joining us today on the Connected Mom podcast. And hey, why don't you subscribe so that you never miss another episode? And we'll see you next week with another episode that will hopefully help you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your kiddo. Thanks for joining us today.